Just to begin with, my name is Don Goff, and I'll be teaching this in a minute, but let's quickly go around the room, and if you would, tell me who you are and flotilla, sector, things like that, and just briefly, if you've had any paddlecraft experience. So, Bill?
I'm Bill Gertson, Swansboro Flotilla 2010. Paddlecraft for lots of years, probably starting in the 60s or thereabouts. Currently ADSO for PA, paddlecraft for North Carolina.
Quinn Baxter, Swansboro Flotilla 2010, the FSOMT, also did paddling for a number of years.
Okay.
Tam Craig, 2304, Curtis Bay, Maryland. And the only time I paddled was staying when I was on Distant Crew with my kid.
It's all right. It's where they all start with.
I'm Marie Allen, 1601, and I'm Secretary of Records and also program visitor, and we have a state park in Gates County, North Carolina.
And this obscure code here means that I am the senior advisor to NACO on things paddlecraft and paddlecraft safety. As an organization, the auxiliary has taken paddlecraft safety very seriously, as you'll see in a few slides from now. And we're trying to get an impact going both ashore and underway in terms of outreach to the public, because the sport is growing, a lot of things are happening, and unfortunately casualties are going up. So what I want to do in the next hour or so, and end up by answering as many questions as you have either during or after, is to talk about primarily the underway program, but the information in that will be useful to those of you who are doing member training, who are doing public affairs, who are doing vessel exams, because the kinds of things that I'm going to talk about are safety features that we built into the underway program to be an example for the general kayaking public. Okay? So the references on this are a Commandant instruction that came out in March of 2015. And we have our own district auxiliary paddlecraft program guide that is posted on the 5th Southern District web page, and it's dated March a year ago. Notice that there is an asterisk beside that Commandant instruction. And as we go through these slides, there are going to be a number of asterisks. What do the asterisks mean? They mean that things here are subject to change. This is a very fluid, very dynamic, new program. There are a lot of efforts underway to perfect it, make it better, make it easier to develop, and fix problems like, say, getting your orders in AOM. There are lots of glitches that we're trying to fix. So if you see an asterisk like that, then consider that specific element to be currently in a state of flux. And of course, when you're dealing with a Commandant instruction, you're talking about headquarters, boating safety office, lawyers, the chief DIROCs, and a whole bunch of things going on at a very senior level to try to get these issues resolved. And this is actually fairly far along, because it's been, as you can see, about 2.5 years since the program was started in trying to do it. So our agenda is to talk about the need, the missions, and how to get started. And for our purposes here, after Sector Maryland NCR, it's getting a really good start in North Carolina and Hampton Roads, and down to the level of your division of flotilla. Okay? So we're getting a basis, particularly in Maryland. We have the cadre who can conduct the training and certify your people and get on the water, especially you get on Smith Mountain Lake, you get in some of those areas where there is no Coast Guard presence. This can be a huge thing, and we know they're doing more boats. We're going to talk about what the requirements are, but I'm not going to beat you up with the details. And then talk about the offer for use, because I do want to use this boat to talk about what's necessary, what's required, and what's desirable if we're going to go out and set an example for the paddling public. We'll look at the specifics of the equipment, both for the individual and for the boat. And then we'll talk about the challenge of getting orders in AOMS if you're not already a coxswain or crewman. Okay. So paddlecraft sales have taken off. You can buy a paddlecraft just about any place. You can buy it at Walmart, Kmart. You can buy it at Dick's. or other sporting goods stores. You can buy it at Tractor Supply. But if you buy it at Tractor Supply, you cannot buy a life jacket. You can buy it at Cabela's, Bass Pro, Outfitters, any of those kinds of shops. And if you do, you're more likely to get a sit-on top with the option of adding rod holders and baskets and possibly a pedal drive, so that it isn't really a paddle craft anymore. It becomes a water toy that has an underwater propeller, and you do that with a bicycle type drive. A lot of these have been reduced to bare minimums of floatability and really marginal safety in order to hit the lowest possible price point. So you can buy a kayak for $150, but you might be getting what you pay for, and not as much as you need. Okay. So in addition to the kayaks themselves, the other big growth area obviously is in stand-up paddle boards. They have taken off like a rocket. This year when Rob and I were over at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Paddle, there were about 400 entrants in this 9.5-mile endurance race. Almost 300 of them were stand-up paddle boards. And at least one woman had been on a rented stand-up paddleboard once before and was out there basically without a clue. We counted a couple of people with no life jackets whatsoever. Most had the inflatables. Most of them had them on in the wrong position on the back. Because if it goes off, what happens? You have the wrong end aimed towards the air. And it's hard to wrestle it around and get it back on. So it's kind of interesting to see the things that go on. Granted, that was a race. Happy that they at least had them on, but there's a big education challenge with all of these things. Now, when I first got into canoeing at Scout Camp in 1959, it was pretty simple. We had a rack of aluminum Grumman canoes with 2 guys. We each weighed about 80 pounds. I think the boat weighed more than we did. We wrestled this thing off. We wrestled it down to the lake. We popped it in. And I was transported. I was every voyageur. I was every pioneer that ever lived. I was out there, and in my mind's eye, I knew all the words in French to alouette, which I didn't otherwise. And I could just keep going all day. We got out there, they gave us about 45 minutes, came back, wrestled this thing, and I was smitten for life. So in those days, and into the 60s and so on, before there were actually outdoor adventure stores, because REI, well, you don't recall because none of you are old enough, REI started out as a mail order catalog, and you had to belong. It was a co-op.
Herders also.
Herders.
Was another one.
Eddie Bauer actually sold equipment and not just clothes in those days, same thing. But if you wanted to find out about canoeing, because there's no kayaking yet in the general public, if you were an Inuit, you might have a skin-on-frame kayak up in the north. But where I was, on a mud-bottom lake in the Midwest, we went down to Bob's, and Bob sold canoes out of his garage. And he did it because he was feeding his hobby, kind of make ends meet. But Bob was also the master of all the lore. He knew everything there was to know about safety on the waterway, what gear you needed, what the issues were if you went in this creek, if you went on that lake. We didn't have any tidal water, but if we had, he probably would have known that too. And he had been all over the place. So he was sort of what we called in those days a classic river rat with his ragged tennis shoes and scruffy beard and all that kind of stuff in an era of the clean shaven. But we could trust him to know what he was talking about. Flash forward to 2017. Now you're at one of those big box stores, and what do you get? You get the clerk of the minute. And how well trained in terms of the details of the safety gear, of the law, the carriage requirements, of the local waterways, of all that sort of thing, do you think that that clerk of the moment has or knows?
Minimal.
Minimal. What do I need for safety? Here's a rack. Who picked out the items on the rack? Bob? No. Some purchasing agent at headquarters picked that out, and it's probably one size fits all, and it may or may not be informed about your local conditions. And Anybody on inland waters, go into one of these stores and find aerial flares, you'll know what I'm talking about. And they're there, okay? So most of the time, these boats that are sold by retailers, the retailers are not paddlers, and the boats are sold with no instruction or guidance. There are a couple of exceptions to that. Some of them will have literature available. Some of them will allow us to put literature in there and make that available. And a couple of places like REI has REI Discovery School, so you can sign up and take on-the-water skills classes from them. But for the most part, there's a complete disconnect. And a lot of the people going in to buy these boats have a mindset that says, oh, it's just paddling. I took a class at Scout Camp in 1959, so I know everything there is to know about it. Not necessarily. Or, we're just going to go out on the water. It's a simple thing, so we don't need to stop and take the skills classes. Let's see if we like it. You know, we're just going to take the kids out and paddle around on the lake for a little while. Why do we need classes? You know, you just paddle, right? So there's a big shortage not only in knowledge about the safety requirements and the safety equipment, there's also a huge disconnect in understanding the value of skills training. Because these are perishable skills, and when I show you some of the things we're talking about in terms of rescues and re-entries and things like that, these are not intuitive. The first time you do them, you'll find them extremely challenging, and you need to practice them every year. Okay? So the issue we're facing is an interesting thing. Since the Coast Guard started keeping records back in 1962, we've actually done a very good job of reducing the number of recreational boating safety deaths, both in real terms and in relative terms. The red line is what the fatality rate would have been had what happened before '62 continued in a straight line. The green line shows you the growth in the number of boats. Okay? So you read that over on this side. So that's about 12 to 13 million boats in the U.S. registered. And the blue line, after the passage of the Federal Boat Safety Act of 1971 and outreach by Coast Guard Auxiliary, power squadrons, the states, and everybody else to do boater education, more safety requirements, and vessel safety checks, this has been the trend line down in actual fatalities. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, it shows that these things can actually work if you make a concerted effort. Okay? So going from what might have been 3,000 a year to right around 500 a year, pretty good story, huh? Except that in paddle sports, we don't have that same trend line. What we have is the exact opposite. With the growth in the sport, the percentage of fatalities that are coming from kayaks and canoes and SUPs is going up. And this stops in 14. In 15 it was here, and in 16 it was even higher. With the biggest spike in 2016 coming in stand-up paddleboards. Okay? So that now we are at about, overall nationally, we're about 30% of all recreational boating safety deaths are happening in paddlecraft. So we have a huge educational problem. It is what we called in the Army a target-rich environment. And you all are the people who can do the outreach and talk to folks about it. Here's why. When you look at the demographics, we actually do a pretty good job with kids. We supervise them, we make them wear life jackets. It's mandatory wear under 14, 14 and under, 13 and under, depends on which state, but nonetheless, for preteens, they got life jackets on, and the couple of fatalities that did occur there were one family that were not prepared and just not there. It comes up a little bit for teenagers, and then surprise, not. 20-somethings, particularly males, and what's involved when 20-something males get in a boat. What don't they do and what do they do?
Captain Budweiser.
Captain Budweiser. Alcohol use and
No life jacket.
no life jacket. And the third part of this is
Women.
That's where their minds are. What are they doing out of, yeah, well, it may be. They may be distracted. Where I was fishing for is they get into situations and think they can handle them, but it's above their experience level. Okay? So they don't have judgment about their own limits. I've got enough stamina. I can see that right over there. I can paddle to it. It's 7 miles. Okay? And when you're paddling at 3 knots, that's a lot further than when you're in a powerboat. Okay? But the other thing that is intriguing, then it drops off a little bit, but look at these numbers here for people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even into their 70s.
You can still do it.
People our age, people we can talk to. This is us, right? And why are they fatalities? Similar reasons, occasionally health incidents, but also some issues that are unique to people in this demographic. For example, an adult male over the age of 50 who drinks 2 or 3 beers now has to either have planned ahead or he has to figure out how to solve the linear throughput problem. And the problem that we're finding is that when they try to go over the side to relieve themselves, they fall in and can't get back in the boat. And are they wearing the life jacket when they fall in? No. So this is a thing that, you know, sort of, oh, I'm not sure if I can talk about that in public, but to an audience that has males over the age of 50 in it, it's a critical requirement because this shows up in the Coast Guard's collected statistics as a problem. Okay? So the Coast Guard wants the problem addressed. It has detailed the implementation of that to the Coast Guard Auxiliary because we are, you know, by charter, the recreational boating safety people for the Coast Guard. And the AUXPAD program has been developed as the implementation tool for doing that. So our job is to post, you know, to move ahead with increasing outreach to this new community because, you know, what have we always done? We've reached out to recreational boating safety community of mostly power boats, occasionally sailboats, and now we're adding this whole new community of millions and millions of paddlers. We're going to remind them of our standby, basic message, wear your life jackets. We're going to promote their compliance with Coast Guard standards, the carriage requirements. What are the carriage requirements for a paddlecraft? Quickly. What's the first one? Life jacket. Okay? What do you have to have on that life jacket or at hand?
Whistle.
A whistle. The regulation says sound producing device, but are you likely to carry an air horn in here? No. So you're talking about a simple whistle. Okay. Very few have the whistle. When I go into the stores and I look around, I ask the clerks, where are the life jackets? And they show me the life jackets. I say, where are the whistles? I think they're over here. And at different brands, different times, different locations, different clerks, they always seem to be 3 aisles away. Okay? So they don't understand the connect between life jacket, sound producing device. What's the third thing you might have to have?
Light.
A ringer. An all-around white light that can be satisfied by a flashlight or by some little fancy doodah like this that operates on a couple of AA batteries and clicks onto the aft deck and dogs down. And when do you have to have that?
Nighttime.
Nighttime. What else?
Reduced visibility.
Periods of reduced visibility. So if you go out and the fog's apt to come in, you need a light. And with LEDs now, you can get a lot of light without much power demand, and you can do that very, very well. But people don't know to do that until you all tell them.
I have a question.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
just had your light there,
Yes.
and you'll be sitting in front of that?
Yeah, there's a problem. The requirement is an all-around white light. This is basic. You can get them this high, too.
So is the rule on this craft that it has to be able to be seen 360?
Yeah.
So if you're in the way, you have to get taller?
That's a problem, yeah.
Okay.
This satisfies the requirement. but it's better to have it up higher. A lot of paddlers will also wear headlamps, but then they can see straight ahead, but people behind them can't see, so it's the opposite problem that you just described.
Do you just need a flashlight?
A flashlight will do. A flashlight will satisfy the requirement legally, but I'm paddling along and I have a spray skirt on, and all of a sudden I hear a power boat over there in the dark. Now I have to fumble around and find the flashlight, I have to turn it on, and I have to aim it in that direction. So I'm better off, from a safety standpoint, to have something like this so that I'm not interrupting and that I can do it quickly enough so that they can see where I am and be able to react accordingly. Because one of the big risks, obviously, is they can't see me, I can get hit. And they're going to win the law of gross tonnage every time.
And they're not gonna see with a light that low either when they're way up high.
You'd be surprised how far you can see these, because we do see these on the
Because they're
on the
not
Potomac
looking.
Road paddle.
They're not looking, they're looking.
Well, if they're on plane, that's a huge problem, right? Because they can't see over the bow on a, if you're going 25, 30 knots and you've got a curved deck, and it's a problem. So higher is better. You can get them that have a tube in them that a flashlight actually goes into, and it will shine up into a plastic reflector cell like this at about 6 feet. And then you can take the flashlight out and use it separately if you want to. Those run 70 or 80 bucks.
Question, I'm an avid cyclist, and they've done tests on red lights and white lights coming from behind, and also when you're in the air and you're looking down, like in daytime, and somebody's in distress, you see red easier than white. So would you advise us to use white or red? Or
The NAV rules require us to use white.
Can I make a comment about that? In the air, red and green signify the left and right side of the aircraft, so you can tell whether they're approaching or...
No, I'm saying when you're looking down. When you're looking down and you're like a search and rescue, you see a red strobe in the daytime easier than a white strobe.
On the waterways, that would be more confusing because it would be non-standard. So, we're constrained by the requirements of NAV rules. NAV rules say all around white light. So we want to do that, and that's what we want to encourage people to do.
Do you go out in the dark a lot in that? Or is it more you get caught in the dark?
A little both. Go out at dusk, go out and see the sunset, and there's a lot of poetry that goes with this. My wife and I go out and we'll do that, and then get back, right at dark or just after. So, but where we do it's more secluded, so it's not a problem. We do it on the Upper Potomac when there's a gazillion boats going through there and water skiers and everything else after dark. I just wouldn't go there because I wouldn't trust them to see me, even if I had a sign on that said, "I am here." Okay.
Thank you.
So, that's the safety equipment. What we're trying to do in the afloat program is have paddlers who are auxiliarists, who have the skills, who have the ability to be exemplars, to go out and paddle up and among the paddling community and talk about these safety issues. We have some handouts that are either available or coming, talk about those a little bit. And we have conversations that we can have with them. But if you think about it, the whole point of being on the water is so we can talk like this instead of standing on a deck and talking like that. So it is a way to communicate comfortably and easily and not be threatening. And of course, it's not an enforcement action, and it's not a, "Hey, you, put on your life jacket" kind of tone. It's one where you have a conversation and say, "Did you know?" Or, when you drive your car, don't you wear your seatbelt? "Oh, yeah." Well, you should probably have your life jacket on because, these boats can come along and swamp you, and you can end up upside down at any minute. So little messages and approaches like that are something of a soft sell, but which is done from a position where we have street cred and we're looking eyeball to eyeball with the community. Also, we're not trying to deal with the high-end people that have 40 years experience. We're looking at novices and people who call themselves intermediates who may have that same weekends experience repeated a dozen times, who go out a couple of times a year. Okay? So it's very basic level. It's the same kind of audience that we talk to when we're doing the recreational boating safety stuff underway, but it's human-powered instead of motorized. Okay? Key thing here is we're going to set that personal example in terms of form, paddling ability, and our ability to talk directly to them. Finally, this is a recreational boating safety outreach program, not operational. All right. Our job is to go talk to the paddling community, not to be rescuers, not to be doing PATON verifications, although we end up being detailed to do that sometimes by the station, or other kinds of things. It's basically in the RBS swim lane related to public affairs outreach. Okay. So, we have a robust program in D5, in sector Maryland NCR. Last weekend, we had a training class, and we had 17 people come for that. Okay? This was done in conjunction between the auxiliarists who are qualified as paddlecraft operators and AUXPAD qualifiers. We had an instructor, one of the senior instructors from the American Canoe Association, and we had financial support from the OTO and the DIROCs. So what I'm saying is there is a support structure and an infrastructure available so that if you're ready to do this in North Carolina or Hampton Roads, contact me or Ron Price, and we will facilitate that. If you have somebody who is already an an ACA instructor, we can do a check ride for them and jumpstart your program. We have time. We may have time to do that yet this fall, he says, hopefully, but we're running out of weekends quickly, as you all know. Okay? So what does all that mean? An AUXPAD qualifier is the equivalent of a QE for the boat crew program. So that's a person that is trained to a higher level. They have to be trained as an instructor, and they'll do the check rides and they'll do the evaluations of people who are going to be paddlecraft operators. All right. So boat crew coxswain is an operator. AUXPAD qualifier is a QE. Does that make sense? You understand that? Just on that thing? All right. In order to become an AUXPAD qualifier, you have to be trained as American Canoe Association instructor. Because what happens when you get the instructor training is you learn how to spot kind of the mistakes that people are making when they do this with their paddle instead of doing this with their paddle. Okay? Or if they paddle like this, instead of keeping a good frame and doing a torso rotation. Okay, see my head's that way, my body's that way. So we teach that. We teach a good frame, we teach a good stroke, because that's what's going to both make us better paddlers because we're going to be more efficient, but also then a better example for the recreational boaters that we're going to go out and talk to. Go through the training and you see this. All right, you go on the waterway, you'll know a difference right away when you see that difference in style. So that's the kind of things that we're looking at. The current requirements say that you must be trained both on a sit-on top and in a decked kayak. But notice the asterisk, because the ACA says if you're qualified in the decked kayak, and you'll need to do that because of the self-rescues and the things you need to do, you can do it in a sit-on top, because for sit-on top, all you have to do for self-rescue is just swim across and climb on. Decked kayak, you have to turn it over, get the water out, and then get yourself back in, or get help from somebody to do that, or help somebody else. So it's a more complicated process to wrestle your leg in there and turn around and sit down than it is to do on a sit-on top. Okay. So, and currently, there's a requirement that currency maintenance be done twice a year. This is copied from the Active Duty Coast Guard, but that is particularly onerous when it requires having only a couple of AQs and then driving, 250 miles to try to do this twice a year. So that, I anticipate, is going to change. As with the boat crew program, there's a third-year recert. Okay. So these are the folks who had a good time last weekend at Y Island. And you can see this is Tom Nichols. He's the senior ACA instructor trainer. Lives in Washington, D.C. He came over and helped. There's a chalk talk, shoreside portion, as well as underway, and then the underway. Okay. The underway includes hesitate there. I'll come back to that. For the operators, you don't have to do the instructor training. You have to do either the sit on top or the touring kayak, depending upon which kind of boat you have. And then the same issue with the currency maintenance requirement and the 3-year recert. But here's what you have to do. You have to know the parts of the kayak. You have to know how to carry it safely on your car. You know, if you see shock cord, you know there's a problem. Right? It's not going to hold it down. Straps are lying, either one's fine. But it has to be secured to the vehicle, and it has to be done both traverse-wise and lengthwise in order to make sure that you've got lateral stability on it. The good news is kayaks work really well because they're aerodynamic. You put this on the top of a car or a truck, it goes. That's in contrast to a canoe, because if you put a canoe on, you put it upside down, you get the air pocket under it, and it tends to pull up. And at best, it's going to reduce your gas mileage, and at worst, it's going to create a problem and come off. So getting them lashed down securely is an important thing. We're going to talk about kayak trim, posture, basic terminology, outfitting, and all this other stuff. Etiquette being a big one. There are lots of customs and traditions in the paddling community that are different from the things we do in the auxiliary community. For example, what does 3 prolonged blasts mean?
You're backing up.
Stern
Reverse
propulsion.
propulsion.
Is she right? You got yeses? Any no's? You're a ringer. I'm not going to ask you. Who's a coxswain? What's the sound signal for reverse propulsion? 3 shorts.
3 short blasts.
3 shorts. So what's 3 prolonged? All right, sidestep for a minute. What's 5 short?
Danger.
Alert or distress, right? So in the tradition of the kayak community, which came out of the voyageurs and came through the lakes and the Mississippi drainage, 3 prolonged blasts is the danger signal. And if you say 5 shorts is a danger signal, they'll look at you blankly. But we don't have 3 prolonged blasts in the nav rules. So there is a cultural difference here. Okay? If we're paddling along and I go like that, what am I telling the canoe or kayak behind me?
Something's over there.
Am I going to, do I want you to go that way, or am I warning you about something there?
Is it danger? Some danger. Pointing out danger هو بروتيج الخاصة.
I'm going to point to where I want you to go. Stop. Stop. This is actually gather up. Stop. But you point where you want to go. And then, silly thing. It's a common thing where every group that goes out, you have to get your rules set up. And you can do it either way. It really doesn't matter because it's not in code anyplace. You just have to know which it means when you do it. So that somebody says, oh, we want to go that way, and somebody else, the person who gave the signal, says, oh, there's a rock there. So this is part of that lore, right? And until people come across it, they don't know to ask the questions, and they get into a situation, they find themselves at risk if they don't do that. All right? Rescues. This is the big physically demanding part of this program. You have to, if you get out of that kayak, be able to get back into it. You don't have to do a roll, but you have to be able to get back into the boat. There are a lot of ways to do it. Better if you have help. Okay? So, if you have help, the other person can have you hang on to the bow while they drain your boat, turn it around, and then hold it while you climb back in from the outside, and everybody goes on their merry way. If you're alone, you can wrestle yourself over the stern in a maneuver called a cowboy. And it's called that because trying to get on a kayak, when you're pushing it up with your weight like that and swim on it, this thing wrestles like a buck and bronco. Takes practice, takes strength and agility. You can also do assisted rescues. Helping yourself with a little bit of apparatus like this. Okay. Know what this is? It's called a paddle float. So while you're hanging on the side of that, which I do by putting my foot in there, you insert it, you close it, you inflate it all the way down here, hanging onto the side of the boat. Now, you have to hold it. And what is going to happen is this is going to work like an outrigger float to help stabilize the kayak while you climb back in. Now, there are 2 or 3 ways you can do it. You can put it like so and hold it on. Put your knee up. Put your other leg in the cockpit. Roll back around. Get your paddle and continue paddling. What do you think the odds are you're going to do that the first time? Takes practice.
Core strength, too.
And, well, you know, the funniest thing is that despite our fragile male egos, to some extent, you know, we can't admit that our upper body strength is not as great as our leg strength. So instead of doing this way, which does require core strength, you can do what's called a heel hook, where you put your foot in here, you do this, and then you use your foot to leverage you up and in and roll over. But it's easy to let loose here when you do that. So these are all things that require practice.
I've seen it sometimes too, where they put the free blade through the bungee. You know, that's okay.
Yeah, you can do that. It's whatever you need to do.
Whatever works, works.
That'll hold it, stabilize it. Okay. And we'll come back to this stuff in just a minute. So when you're upside down, you have to be able to get out of the boat. For our purposes, a spray skirt's not required because that adds an impediment that actually is at a higher level. You can if you want to, but if you do, you have to have instruction on how to release it, how to get yourself out of it, and so on. And then carry the boat. Remember when you took life-saving as a kid? Cross-chest carry? Only it's the kayak instead of a person. You're going to empty it, and then do the deep water stuff. Strokes, forward, backward draw, details on that. I won't beat you up with this. But these are the basic strokes required. I will say, though, that the intent here is to maintain your frame. Think about Dancing with the Stars. They always tell them you got to keep your frame, right? So we're going to paddle this way. We're going to low brace this way by just doing cow horns and going down. We're going to do a reverse stroke this way. We're going to do a draw stroke this way. But notice that the frame stays intact all the time. And with practice, you get the muscle memory, so you're doing it. Because, you know, when you were at camp 30 years ago, you probably did this, because it seemed easier, instead of maintaining the frame. And if you want to get really fancy, you can do a low brace turn, where you put the paddle edge down like that on the plane, and shift your weight, and it's like a step turn skiing, and you carve this nice telemark, and everybody goes, wow, that's cool. So, old dogs can do new tricks. Let's practice. L2 adds granularity and detail. You'll have access to these slides. And more on the rescues and maneuvers. Same strokes, more detail. And then now let's talk about offer of use. You go in for a 3-day weekend and you get the ACA training course. L1, L2 is often offered combined. To graduate from those courses, though, you need to demonstrate the skill, not just attend. So a lot of times, a weekend may not be enough to get those skills to that level. So be prepared for that. You can go to many, many, many kayak instructors who do this for fun, who've gotten their instructor rating, who will coach you and help you just for fun and to help keep their skill levels up. Right? They're always looking for somebody who wants to jump in the water and do rescues. And if you have any problems finding that, you can go to AmericanCanoe.org. You can download the Paddle Ready app, and there's an instructor finder using a zip code search, and you can find people in your own area within X number of miles, whatever you put in. Okay? And they're often very willing to do these things and do them for free. Some of them do it for a living. So be aware of that. Oh, sure, I'll do that for $300 a day. So just be careful, you know, what you're getting into at the front end and be upfront about that. But I'm sure that you can find, and we can help you find, help to get these skill sets early, often, and inexpensively. All right. So the 7012A is similar to a vessel safety check, vessel exam form 7012, except it's modified for paddlecraft. The important thing on that form is, besides a bunch of stuff, gear, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is hull integrity. All right, all of you VEs know that you have to look thoroughly down in the bilges when you're doing a power boat. But when you're doing a paddlecraft, I have to go over here now. People will take these boats and simply drag them along by the stern. Okay? What does an oyster bed on Chincoteague do to the stern of a plastic kayak? Yes. Okay. So what can you do to find out if it's intact? With the owner's permission, you can pour water in and see if it comes out. All right. Same thing for auxiliary paddlecraft. Now the problem areas besides the stern are that people will scooch when they're coming into shore, so it will wear out right under the cockpit, right here. Pour water in there. Look, just because there's no drips doesn't mean there's a leak. If you turn it up and you look, what you'll see is you'll see a spreading wet spot, because these holes are almost microscopic. So what it's doing is it's osmosis going through the bottom of the thing. And I see this all the time, particularly at the liveries. When I go down to Mason Neck State Park, the state has a franchisee running the boat rental thing, and these get particularly hard wear. So you go and look at them, and you see, the wet spot on the bottom, and it's like almost impossible for them to fix. So they'll go through 2 or 3 boats per rack per summer. It's that much damage from the sand. You don't even have oyster beds. Okay? So if you're doing VEs, that's important. And if you're doing an offer for use, that's very important. The other things we want to have is, this boat has bulkheads. There's one here beyond the feet. All right. What that means is that the bow and stern are separate compartments, so that when, because it's not if, it's when the boat goes over, when it fills up with water, it will only do the cockpit. To increase the probability that there will not be flooding, we'll add float bags, bow and stern. Okay? Blow these up, they fit in there, and they displace 50, 60, 80 gallons of water apiece. That's important when you're in the water. If you have a decked kayak that does not have bulkheads, and there are a lot of those for sale, you can still fit things like that, or you can get the sealed bags that you use for camping and roll down the top and just fill them with air, and you can stick those in the bow and stern.
Externally?
Internally.
Like a dry bag.
Internally, like a dry bag. You just stick it in the bow and stern. So a lot of those inexpensive ones, and especially the short ones, are built with a strut here, and your feet actually go on both sides of it, right? And there's sort of this minimal closed cell foam on it that will allow the boat to be neutrally buoyant when it's filled with water. Neutrally buoyant means it just sort of bobs there at the surface. Now add your 100+ pounds to it, then what happens? It sinks. So displacing that is an important thing, and an area where a lot of the casual kayakers don't think of it or don't want to spend $40 for the fancy bags. Back when I was going to Bob, he said use inner tubes, but you can't get inner tubes anymore. Whatever it takes, because it's not just flotation, and think of it as water displacement. Okay? So it's going to keep that water out of there, and water has weight.
Question,
Yes, ma'am.
how do you check the ones that have the pedals inside now?
We don't really have a form for that because that's not a paddle craft or a powered craft. It's a water toy. So it ranks up there with the duck boats that you used to go to on the pond that had the little swan's head on the front.
Well, they're kayaks with the pedals to go fishing.
Yes,
It's easy to control.
it would not be a paddle craft though. But it's the reason I'm hesitating is because the pedaling is human powered.
Right.
But if they have if it's motorized,
It's
you know,
just
then
the
it
pedal.
depends.
So if they're fishing, they can use both their arms and back up or go
Yes,
forward
right.
with the pedals, right?
Yeah. Well, with the propeller, they go back and forth. With the fins, they can only go forward.
Okay.
It's a problem area and one that the Coast Guard hasn't quite figured out how to deal with yet.
Yeah, I would think they would leak around there, where the pedals.
Well, there are sit-on-top kayaks. So a sit-on-top kayak is basically a hollow core plastic box. And it has scuppers, so it's self-bailing, and it has a closed, think of it as like a centerboard trunk on a sailboat. It has a hole in there, you put the thing down in. Water can get in there, but it also drains back out.
I just saw them online, I go, that'd be great.
It's a big area. It is a huge area. At the Paddlecraft Retailer Show 2 weeks ago, that's the future as far as the industry is concerned. Every major supplier has one now. Old Town and Perception, and Eddy Line, and as well as Hobie and the others that have done it already. For the boat, we're going to have flotation, bulkheads, and deck lines. That's not a deck line. That's bungee. This is a deck line. A deck line is rigid. It's along the perimeter of the boat. And for our program, it's required. And a lot of boats don't have them. Doesn't mean you can't retrofit them. All right? And when you put it on, you want it to be snuggish, but not so tight that when you're in the water, you can't get your hand around it. Can also be used for a contact tow. So you put a carabiner in there in your line, you snap to it, and then if somebody's exhausted or whatever, one of your colleagues, your companion, too much heat, sun, whatever it is, then you can tow them using this. You can't tow them using this. This is for lifting the boat. It's not good for a tow. And this, stretches to the point where it won't do any good to climb back in with. So you want to have that, reach across to that side when you're doing all these complicated maneuvers. It just keeps going. Okay? So boat requirements. Deck lines, flotation, secondary flotation beyond the capacity of the basic minimum required, and then also identification on the boat. Why don't you tell us about if found stickers? By the way, these are available again at ANSC as item 3004A.
200 a month,
You can have 200 a month per flotilla.
if you like. I'm Bill Gertson from Swansboro. How many here are VEs and have had issues with these sticking on kayaks? There's at least 2 of us, myself included. And I think you've even had them also.
Sure.
Well, we wind up using Sharpies on these very often, they wear out. Well, here's something that a relative of mine who's in the aircraft business on the West Coast. This is a paint pen, actual paint. Good news is it's permanent, it's opaque, it dries in 5 to 7 minutes, but it also can come off with alcohol before it dries. I'm just going to put my name on it, on the board, this piece of fiberglass. And if someone wants to time it, they can. I'm going to pass this around, and you can see it, and when it comes back to me, I'm going to take a piece of Kleenex and see if it comes off. But this will hopefully save Coast Guard SAR assets. Because in our area, on the intercoastal, we have spoil islands, and people will go up and walk around and look for shells, and before you know it, the tides pick them up, and they're floating free, and then someone calls sector and says, we got a kayak with no one in it, or a canoe with no one in it, or a sup with no one on it. That becomes an automatic, 24-foot SAR case for Station Emerald Island. So this is an experiment. We've got some folks, some VEs in our flotilla. We do over 700 VEs every year for our flotilla. Probably going to make 1,000 this year. And we've had major issues with these things coming off. We have about 19 kayak vendors that are from Atlantic Beach to Wilmington. And we've tried to get these on, and we're getting phone calls, oh, the sticker came off, you got more. Or we can't keep the Sharpie information on it. So we're going to just take a look at these. But that is something that we may be able to use to augment this. I found it interesting, if we just had a culture of VEs putting on a kayak or a sup. Of course, stand-up paddleboards have a anti-skid surface on them, so these things don't stick very well at all. So if we wound up with just a couple of initials, inside or on a sup, just say, IFC, which means if found contact, with a phone number and a name, and then someone said, well, you know what, we don't have to call the Coast Guard, or the Coast Guard says, is there an ID on it? Give me the phone number. The OOD will make a phone call. That may save Coast Guard assets and SAR time. As soon as you're done with that, I got to take it next door. But I thought that might be something we could consider.
Any experimenting with a wipe of acetone or anything?
Well, it can come off with alcohol. Of
No,
course.
getting the stickers to stick.
Well, no, we've tried all sorts of stuff. We've even gotten to the point of putting them in a Ziploc bag and then glue them to the inside of the kayak or on top. But they don't do really the kind of job that something that is a good marker on it. My only concern is that maybe the owners of kayaks may object to this sort of thing if they have to sell it, but you know, that's the way it goes. These things, I understand, also come in colors. So
Not from the Coast Guard.
they come in colors, but the manufacturer makes it in colors. But I'm trying to track down the manufacturer and see, you know, what are the possibilities.
Haven't run into that one yet.
Pardon?
Let me know if you run into that.
I'll try to get more information for you, Tom.
With any, I know it's maybe above our pay grade, but talking to the manufacturers, I wrote a letter to Boating Magazine.
Yep.
Lots of advertising for boats and lots of people wearing life jackets. But here, in one of their feature articles, is it could happen to you. And here's a, you know, a first-hand story of a guy who got stuck, da-da-da. And how to fix it? Wear your life jacket, number one. That's the biggest takeaway from. But here there are loads of advertising with people not, or a feature article of a guy holding up a big rock bass and no life jacket on. So I wrote to them and I said, you know, is there any way you could, you know, just take a stand. You take a stand on smoking, on abortion, or whatever it is. Take a stand on life jacket wear, that we will not accept any advertising if the models in the photographs are not wearing life jackets. And they responded back and said, we can't dictate to our advertisers, you know, it's just money, but
There is some movement on that.
Huh?
One is that
I'm sure.
ASX2 has,
believe it.
this year, in fact, developed a brochure and has MOUs with a number of the manufacturers to include for the first time that 9-fold Be Safe, Be Smart information guide. It's the first time we've been able to get a brochure in there other than life jacket wear. But that's happening now. And we have that available as well in the auxiliary inventory, so you can use that for marine dealer visits. Okay. The other area is that there is a program, and if you read like Paddling Magazine or Adventure Kayak or any of those, there is a program now called Safety is Cool. And it's taking all these big name paddlers as spokespersons for safety, and it's showing them in photographs wearing life jackets on a number of different kinds of equipment. So that has shown up in all of 2017 in every issue of all of those Rapid Media and Paddling Net and so on and so forth. So that's showing up, and I see this all the time. West Marine even fixed its poster. So it's got paddlers all in life jackets in the store. So
I've even seen West Marine salespeople, you know, wearing a life jacket. You know, trying to lead by example situation.
Right.
So one of the things I see, obviously comfort would be a major factor in a kayak. So I did a commercial with Fish and Game in Tennessee, for example, and the model came out and he had a life jacket on, but it was not a Coast Guard approved life jacket. So a lot of these fancy looking ones that look comfortable are not Coast Guard approved. So we weren't allowed to film that commercial because it was not a Coast Guard approved life jacket. So I don't know how much of that we see or you see out there during vessel safety checks with paddlecraft and SUPs and so forth, but
it's a problem, and it's a problem with online purchasers because they're coming from China and they don't have it. And the other thing I learned at D9 up in on Lake Erie is that the Canadian Coast Guard will accept U.S. Coast Guard, but the U.S. Coast Guard won't accept Canadian Coast Guard.
Commercial fishing vessel exams, we can't accept any or issue a decal for any commercial vessel that's got a flotation suit, dry suit made in Canada.
While we're there, let's just stay there. Let's talk about life jackets. We've been talking about equipment on the boat. I showed you the paddle float. The other thing that's useful to have is a handy billy like this. And if you are doing VEs or if you're doing public affairs, a lot of people who kayak also ride bicycles. So when they get one of these, what do? Push, and then it goes dribble, dribble, dribble. It's pull. Seems simple, but somebody out on the water doing it for the first time isn't thinking that way. So you've got to say pull and demonstrate it if you've got one to do it with. Okay? So you're all familiar with type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, and type 5 life jackets, are you not? And if so, you know that if you go to a livery, or when you were at scout camp, the one you're most likely to get was a type 2 horse collar, right? And a type 2 horse collar is difficult to paddle in because all the flotation is up and around here. So as you paddle, it rides up. So people don't like to wear them. And if it's a hot and sweaty day, you get a rash on your neck. So people take them off and don't use them. A lot will get a standard type 3, the vest type that you get for your boats. Most people use on your boats, the universal ones. And how are they configured? The flotation goes all the way up to the shoulders and sometimes all the way over and back down, right? So when you paddle, what happens is it rides up like this, for whatever the limit is. So the paddler's jackets, like this one, cost a little bit more than the $25 type 3s. But they have the flotation down lower, both in the front and in the back, so that you can do shoulder motion and be comfortable while you're doing it. The better news is they are now making these specifically for women. So the foam underneath is shaped, depending on the brand, either with a cup cutout or with a place to add support. But almost all the women who have tried these things find them helpful, more comfortable. And of course, part of our sales pitch is if you're going to, we want people to wear life jackets, so get one that's comfortable. If you have to spend a little more, do it. But particularly for this program, we do have a Stolquist women's life jacket that is approved for OXPAD underway in D5.
What's it called?
It's a Stolquist brand, STOHLQUIST. It is a women's type 5. Oh, wait a minute. What's a type 5? I'm wearing a type 5, actually a 3 and a 5. What makes it a type 5 is that it has this apparatus back here for a tow line. And it has this quick release. So that if I have a tow line on there and I want to release it, it'll just slide off when there's weight on it. Okay? So that's what makes it a type 5.
So why would you have a tow line on your person?
Because in a kayak, there's no Samson post or cleat, and you want to have a quick release.
They're gonna tow you,
If I'm towing them,
you're towing them.
if I'm towing them, I'm the tower.
Okay.
So people that get involved with this program, they have to get that particular type?
Yeah, we have these for people in the program. The OTO has some.
Now, as you're talking about this, these skyrocketing paddleboarding and kayaking and Craigslist and Facebook and mass marketing, what percentage, if you know, are at that level of this boom?
To know what this is?
Yeah, no. A paddler who would need a jacket like that and be towing somebody.
No, the towing jacket is only for our purposes in the OXPAD program.
Oh, all right, got it.
No.
Got it.
All that a paddler needs is a type 3,
Yeah.
which is this jacket without the tow harness.
Got it.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the type 3s are the ones that come in both men's and women's now, as well
Got
as,
it.
the universal, one size fits all kind of thing.
Sure.
I mean, I've been in shops that are selling those, commercial. I've been in shops that are selling those commercial.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these are high-end, though. This is a
Yeah.
premium shop kind of stuff. This is an REI, LL Bean kind of thing, as opposed to Walmart or even Cabela's. Most of those are type 3s.
300, 200?
This is 170.
The ones
I got one
outside
for my
outdoor.
wife. I got one for my wife at REI that was 75. Without just a plain type 3 without the towing harness. Just a simple.
Great Outdoor Provision has them with the towing harness for about 130, something like that.
Yeah, you can shop price. I mean, this is what we tested. To get these approved, they had to go through the Boat Forces office in Yorktown. So that's why I say Stolquist and this is a Kokatat. And part of the problem is these brands don't, there's not enough room to put U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary on the back. And if you try to apply it somehow, you destroy the integrity of the vest. So far, we're relying on the other insignia.
I want to talk about your paddle and what different kinds there are,
Sure.
if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. This is a basic, I think I paid $40 for this. When I go do training, I bring this one along. It's aluminum with a plastic blade, and the blade is black. And what I've done is I've added these stickers, because when I'm down on the water, there's not much of me that's visible, even my orange shirt. What people are going to see is they're going to see the glint and the motion on that blade. So that little Mylar thing there increases the glint. These will be in the auxiliary system sometime in the next couple of months at ANSC to give out to paddlers.
They were actually
And
passing
stickers.
those out in Richmond, at the Richmond Raceway last weekend. The sheriffs had a booth that were passing
They had
those
some of
out.
those? Okay. Well, we were able to get the prototypes developed, and they're going through the final vetting now, so we should have them available. And they're round instead of oval, and they've got the paddle responsibly thing on it and some safety information on the back.
So you want to, if you're buying a new paddle, you want a curved paddle, you want a straight paddle, what's the difference?
You go,
What
paddle and you go to.
kind of paddling you're going to do? Does it come, what she's talking about is the angled, you
Yeah.
know, is that easier,
I mean,
more efficient?
Or you might want to, you know, if you want to spend the money for the carbon fiber, it's lighter and,
Sure.
you know, less fatigue. And stuff like that.
Well, because I'm a old-fashioned purist, I have a set of wood ones. And these adjust so you put a feather in if you want them. Most of them do. The other common materials besides wood and aluminum and plastic is carbon fiber, as he mentioned. And those will run $350, $400. So when we're doing training, we don't use those. We
Do
use
they
these.
shatter?
No, they're very, very robust. They're very strong. But when you start doing the maneuvers here, we're trying to get on it, the weak point is the joint right here. And what'll happen is if you get a 200-pound person on there, it'll crack right there, and you've got a $400 oh golly gee moment. Okay. As far as shape goes, practice with a bunch of different ones and find out what's comfortable for you.
Where do you go to do that?
Well, you go to the liveries, or you go into the stores and you just sit in a boat. Don't stand up and do it. Sit in a boat and play with it. See what's comfortable. Okay. And then adjust it by how much you're willing to spend. You can get these now in a variety of colors on top other than your basic black. I mean, we're beyond the Model T and the Bell telephone. So I encourage, and the liveries in DC now are issuing these in international orange, in this color. So you can always tell the rental boats, which just the commercial boat drivers are just loving that. So they know that they don't know anything, they stay away from them. So you can get a lot of designs that are bright, but the key thing is to remember visibility. Okay. Glint and color. Did that answer your questions? You can, like any other hobby, you can spend yourself into forever on this stuff. Or you can just make a basic decision, go paddling and have fun. Okay. So, in addition to the life jacket, we're going to add on a PLB. And a handheld radio. We're required to have a GPS. My suggestion is, rather than carrying two items, get a handheld radio with digital selective calling, a distress button that has a built-in GPS. You can actually put in waypoints and navigate with these radios with practice. And in fact, you should. if you have charts, how are you going to pilot? Because you're piloting, not navigating. If you're in a period of reduced visibility, or if a rip current pulls you offshore to the point where you can't see a landmark. You can see it on the chart. You can wrestle with the chart on that deck while you're trying to paddle and maintain trim, because if you're in a situation now, you got wind and wave that's wrestling with you. So you can dispense with that, and with the new generation of these things, it's almost like a chart plotter, so it will provide you with it'll provide you with an ability to put in waypoints in advance. Most important waypoint is where you put in. Because then if you get out there, wherever you are, you can go back to that. It'll show you how to get there. Once again, practice, practice. Simple solution. How many kayakers have a marine radio? This is $200x dollars. They're thinking in terms of $200x dollars for everything else. Price points matter. But if they're serious about going offshore or off of the Outer Banks or Assateague or whatever, it's a good investment. You know, what's your life worth? Last item that you have to have for the boat is a heaving bag. Now, how many of you are coxswains or crew in the boat crew program? All right? And you were taught to stand on the back deck and throw it like that, right? Or maybe like that. You're in the kayak now, you got to throw it like that. Practice, practice, practice. Okay. Last but not least, for operational patrols, our OTO is a saint. He got his helmets with boom mics. Plug this into the top of the radio, you can paddle along and talk at will. It's great stuff.
So that's going to be standard, the helmets?
Well, to the extent the budget allows it. We have them for now. We're passing them around, we only have 3. Otherwise, we're just wearing a ball cap. Okay. So we have permission to wear the orange shirt, blue swim trunks or shorts. Problem with the ODU shorts is what? You have a pocket. It doesn't have a drain hole. So you're in the water and you climb back in the boat, what do you have? 12 pounds of pocket. And it puts it back in the boat. So we're trying to get away from that with the risks attendant on it. And why do we have a long sleeve t-shirt like this? Sunburn. Sunburn. For us on the water, sunburn, hyperthermia are huge problems, more so than hypothermia. You know, all of the boat crew program is hypothermia, hypothermia. Sunshine in the middle Atlantic states in the summertime, nobody's getting hypothermic, but they're going to get hyperthermic. And then get sunstroke because they just don't realize how much sun they're getting off the water.
But, you know, those of us in the boat crew program wearing either rolled up OUs or t-shirts.
I can only deal with this. Well, the ODUs, you know, it's a heat sink. And most of the, you got a Dodger on most of the power boats too. There's no Dodger on this thing except your bulkhead or your tiller.
Does this program have a seasonal aspect to it?
Based on water temperature and air temperature, so you can go out as long as the, you know, as long as you're in the operating parameters. So if the water temperature is above 60, you're good. There is no provision for, you can't wear a Mustang or a dry suit in these things.
Right.
So it's the temperature is the.
Because last year in Virginia, December 28th, there were a kayaker drowned in the Chesapeake. But there's no, so that would preclude any cold water activity.
We're not doing cold water activities. Right. But it's local, it's not, caveat, it's above 60 degrees. Well, hello, Commodore, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I noticed we were having lunch in the Adams room. Was that a coincidence?
Well, considering how much money we pay them, it's about time they gave us a recognition. How's your class going, sir?
We're fine. Nobody's fallen asleep yet, and nobody's thrown any rotten tomatoes, so I guess it's okay.
I think it's going great, and God knows we need this.
Dog's life
One of those parameters.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess,
They call it dog's life.
I guess the dog's gonna get you by the nape of the neck and swim in with you, right?
Yeah, it's Ren 10 or something. Right? Hey, Don, quick question. What, I just want to hear your thoughts on this idea of the shirt that you have on. When we're doing ashore public affairs, specifically for paddlecraft.
You can show them, but the uniform will still be TROPS.
Or ODUs. I mean,
As
we wear
appropriate for
ODUs
the-
on PA events, but, which we are doing more of, you know,
Yeah, I was
especially
taking
when
it
it's
show 'em.
very casual. But, you know, I just was thinking, you know, that the shirt would be interesting.
And when I do the PE classes, I don't wear it, I wear TROPS, but I show it, you know, and I have civilian versions of it as well. You know, one it's actually got, it's got camouflage here, but it's orange elsewhere, so it's like a hunter shirt or something like that. And I've got a red running shirt that's bright too, so it's all about the brightness.
Okay.
So can we wear that shirt if we're in a paddlecraft on a patrol?
Yes.
And we can get that
From Ron Price.
from Ron Price?
All right, so here's the long list of that, and notice once again that we have a handful of asterisks. This is what goes on you, place the patrol sign. I didn't mention a spare paddle or a distress signal yet. So a lot of people will take a spare paddle and disassemble it so it's in two pieces, like this, and put it on the front of the kayak. Or sometimes in a group, one will take one half and the other take the other half. Then you have this much to get to the other half. An alternative, and one which I did, and this is a West Marine item, not a paddlecraft vendor item, is one of these folding paddles. It doesn't take up much space, and it has the added advantage of being orange. If I can see this. But you have to have a spare of some kind. We also require taking a cell phone as a backup. But cell phones don't float, so you need some kind of waterproof thing to put it in. And this one will actually allow you to operate the phone through the film on top. Okay? Being a penurious, that's the polite word for cheapskate, Midwest German Lutheran, I have my old Nokia phone that doesn't do anything but talk. I went to the kiosk at the mall, and for 15 bucks, I got a one-time SIM card. So I keep that charged, and I keep that in a waterproof thing with a notebook and a pen, just hanging around my neck when I go out. So then if I lose anything, it's the $15 SIM card instead of the $600, now going to $1,000 smartphone. So just practical solution there. That's the cheap phone right there.
What about the shoes?
No specific requirement. I generally wear these.
You're required to wear shoes?
You need shoes,
Nothing
and they
to
need to have a
prevent
covered
it.
toe, because you don't want to wear Tevas, because you get in there and you get oyster shells bite. Yeah, exactly.
They recommend also the hard sole because
Yes.
some people use the water shoes that are usually for the beach, and it's reached a point that it's not really good.
Good point. You're right. Yeah, hard sole, as she said, because you want protection against sand, riprap, oysters, whatever it is, underfoot, and cover your toe. Oh, the last item is distress signals. in the boat program, we're always saying you got to have flares, you got to renew the flares because the flares expire after 3 years, all that kind of stuff. In a kayak, a flare isn't necessarily a good idea. They have their uses, but if you're in an incident where you might have to use a flare, there's probably a 90% probability that you're going to be in the water hanging onto the boat. And if you look at the instructions on your flare, you will see that that's in about a 4-point font. When you're going up and down like this and hanging onto the boat and trying to figure out how to do that for the first time, it's dangerous because people can flip them back in and these boats will go poof, and you got a Viking funeral. So for less than $10, you can get an international distress flag. You can fold it down into the space that fits right beside the hip brace. And when you have it, you can either turn it into a flag if you want to take the time by tying it onto the paddle and waving it like a flag above your head, or if you're back in the boat, you can sort of put it over yourself to increase your visibility like a poncho, or you can simply drape it over the boat while you're hanging on down here, and it'll increase your visibility for local law enforcement or the Coast Guard if they're coming to look for it. Of course, if you have digital selective calling on your radio, they'll know who they're coming for.
Can you take a red siloon on a 3-foot lanyard, break it, and then sling it, you know, like a big circle?
I suppose.
Do that with tires,
Because that's certainly, you know, high visibility.
You can get orange siloon
Yeah.
light sticks. Interestingly, a lot of the dealers sell the green-yellow ones, the lime-colored ones.
Yeah.
But to me, that doesn't do anything for distress. It just says, oh, there's a fisherman over there.
Right.
And if you get in that red-orange kind of part of the spectrum, I think people
That's a
have
green
enough sense
light
to know
go.
that it's a problem.
That's a green light.
So putting
Go
them
faster.
on a fishing pole and slinging them around, I had never thought of that.
Yeah, because we commercial fishing folks up in, especially in Alaska, you know, survival, you know, schools, you know, that's one thing they teach.
Oh,
So
okay.
a 3-foot lanyard and a siloon, because, you know, from a helicopter, you know, that 3-foot signal, 3-foot circle is easier to see.
Okay, good.
Just a minor note, the DSC works if you register your MIMSI number. Coast Guard has gotten thousands of calls from unknown registered DSC numbers. So that is a point where people will just think you press the red button, but never filled out the card.
Must fill out the card. No charge to do that at Boat US on their website. You can change it. So if you've got a handheld and you're like me and you do this in a kayak one day, and you go on Jerry's boat one day and I go on Bill's boat another day, I have the option of changing out and putting which boat I'm on. But I just usually leave this registered to unnamed wooden sea kayak, so in my name. Actually, I call it delayed entropy.
PLB?
Engineering humor.
PLB?
Yes, PLB. The PLB, I change out life jackets because I have one PLB, and I was underway last week, but that big McMurdo brick will actually fit in here.
Oh, well.
So how are we doing? All right. To participate in the program, in addition to all the kayak stuff from the American Canoe Association and the additional gear, NAVREL's exam is required, ICS 210 or 300. You got to show how to operate your GPS. It's not enough to own it, because you can't get out on the water and read the instructions. And then there are a list of specific tasks about weather, communications, and chart plotting and things like that from the regular boat crew program that are incorporated in here. If you're already a boat crewman or a coxswain especially, you're there. So it's not that big a deal. But for people who are coming into it new, a lot of people are daunted by the NAVREL's exam. We have made that a prerequisite to taking the free underway training. And so it's been interesting to see how
Can
much
I give
effort
you another
we put into it.
advertisement?
Sure.
2010 has got some folks that will provide a nav rules seminar, and this gentleman right here can attest that it does work.
Is that online? Whatever?
No, it's
It's a
something
live
we've
class?
done, we haven't done it online, we've done one class, and out of the class, like everyone passes without any problem.
Let's talk about doing that online.
Breaks it, I'm trying,
Okay.
it breaks that nav rules book down to logical determination process, so you can take the test and pass. No problem.
Well, good.
Either that or do, was it 95 once or twice?
You can do that.
Keep
Yeah,
moving,
there-
right.
And there is an online instructor augmented course on the national website. But I don't know if people are just scared by it or what, but it's a little bit of a gotcha exam, but it shouldn't be that daunting. And put into context, for a Coast Guard enlisted person who goes to school as a bosun over Yorktown, they have to pass that same exam before they can be promoted to EE4. So this is, we can do this. We can all do this. This is not a problem. This is a basic skill set that is achievable with basic learning skills. So yeah, take a course, do it. All right. AOMS right now, we have a problem. Note the asterisk on there. After you get your auxiliary paddlecraft operator certification, you still can't get orders in AOM unless you're already a boat crewman or a coxswain. It's a programming problem that we thought was fixed a year ago at headquarters, and it turned out they didn't link it to AUG's data. So you show up with the certification, you'll show up in the directory with the certification, but you'll be not getting orders yet, and hopefully that will get fixed before next paddling season, because it's, shall we say in a polite way, somewhat irksome to not get credit for the hours that you're out there.
Frustrating.
Okay. The other thing is there's a tandem operating requirement. The tandem operating requirement is another kayak, a jet ski, an OPFAC, a Coast Guard boat, or with the approval of the order issuing authority, local law enforcement. So that would occur if you are doing maybe one of these waterfront festival kind of things, and the police boat's there, but the Coast Guard didn't come there for whatever reason.
Now, when you say tandem, what does the proximity have to be? Has to be that close.
Visual. Visual.
That'd be frustrating for a jet ski.
Not that I have strong opinions on this or anything, but I have always suspected that the word kayak is understood by jet skiers to be the Eskimo word for speedboat. Other resources, if you want to find out more.
The jet skier is also a tandem requirement.
For a personal watercraft operator, yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's basically the same requirement.
All right, so that,
I'm talking about civilian jet skiers who are all 12 years old, no matter how old their bodies are.
the kayak and the PWC operator count for each of them as a tandem team?
Yeah, because we've used them with, regular
So
facilities.
the line of sight, benefits the PWC operator as well as the paddler.
Now, I don't think we've done any, have Ron and Wendy done any PWC slant kayaking?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm not either.
Getting ready to do something on the 24th, but I don't think they're going to incorporate that. I think it's strictly PWC, but
That's the way most of these missions are separate, so. Remember, this is recreational boating safety outreach. PWC is fully operational, so kind of in different worlds too.
True, but in this case, they're crossing over together, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so if they're a public affairs
But
man.
the paddler meets his requirements for the patrol as well as the PWC operator.
Yes. Boat or personal watercraft, Coast Guard boat, law enforcement, or an expand facility. Okay? Additional information on the national website. If you go to Paddlecraft, if you go, breadcrumb is, if you go to departments, you go to recreational boating safety, you go on the recreational boating safety webpage, Over on the left side, you'll see a thing for Augs B Wiki, this side. When you get there, you go to Paddlecraft, and there's a whole library of stuff that will give you links to YouTube and Hulu and stuff like that, how to do it things that you can use, show. These are all public domain things that were developed on Coast Guard grants. So you can go there and then you can use that, you can show that in your classes and public affairs events if you have connectivity. We also have 2 sets of Paddlecraft safety videos that we filmed for the auxiliary. Those are for member training only, because those haven't gone through all of the clearance stuff. So they're behind, you have to log in to get those. It says AugsPad. And it has a lot of information in it, like 5 life jackets for paddlers, how to inflate a waist pack and put it on, how to do a stand-up paddleboard VSC. And we're going to have one on how to do a kayak VSC, but work got in the way. Right. So there's a series of those that you can use for member training, and the feedback I've gotten from people who have shown those at flotilla meetings, because you can see all of it in about 10 minutes, is pretty positive. So, you know, it's all in the editing, obviously. So take a look at those. You can access those on the Recreational Boating Safety page in the RBS department. There are also some outward-facing ones, and those include brochures that you can order or that you can download and print locally. So there's a ton of resources available now. All this stuff was in short supply before. In the inventory, we have the orange stickers now at ANSC. We have the 9-fold Be Smart, Be Safe brochure. It's a really good one. It had a lot of input. It talks about everything from the stuff I've shown you to weather and tides and things that kayakers generally don't get. And it's being issued a lot of places with the boats, with the sale of boats. And we will soon have the silver blade stickers. Okay, so watch that space and utilize the stuff.
Don?
Yeah.
Also, our ADSO for new media took that Be Smart, Be Safe,
yeah,
and created a series of Facebook posts.
Oh, cool.
So as spreads,
yeah.
So it makes a series of, I forget how many, Facebook posts.
Be nice.
And you did that prior to last National Safe Boating Week.
Fair.
So those are available for any Flotilla's Facebook page.
Okay, and it's also available in electronic form on the national website,
Okay.
the RBS page. So that and a couple of others. Rules of the Road is a big problem in mixed-use waterways. That brochure is available, and a top 10 safety kind of thing, as well as the PE class has a lot of stuff you can print out. Equipment lists and safety tips and stuff like that. It's, you know, use your auxiliary association benefit to go to Office Depot and you get them for about 8 cents a 100. Okay? Need help getting started? Contact one of us. Ron has really been going great guns. Ran that training program last weekend, he and his wife Wendy. Awesome stuff. And eager to go. All right? And finally,
Can you keep that for that one?
sure.
Thank you.
Don, do you know if there is those teachers in here? Because I know
No.
only Ron West have it, right?
Ron has them. They brought them
Sally
up.
Douglas.
Yeah, the latest version has this on both sleeves, and this is scaled right, so this was the prototype.
And also I found out there is also a short sleeve of that version, but always is better than long sleeve.
Right. There is a short sleeve version, but the long sleeve is definitely better for some. Okay,
Where we can order those?
from Ron,
Just directly only?
But you have to be in the program.
to wear it. You can wear the spirit wear, but you can't wear it as a uniform, except all wears it.
So you have the shorts too?
We can place it on this paper.
This is Coast Guard issued, so this is just out of uniform clothing sales.
And we authorize it to put it in our PV booth for display, right? In the PV?
Yes, you can do that, sure. You can do that just to demonstrate the importance of visibility. You can do orange, you can do red, you can do anything like that, sure. Other questions or comments?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Okay. This is what goes in the vote.